Chapter 13 Detention with Dolores. Dinner in the great hall that night was not a pleasant experience for Harry. The news about his shooting match with Amber seems to have traveled exceptionally fast even by Hogwarts standards. He heard whispers all around him as he sat eating between Ron and Hermione. The funny thing was that none of the whispers seemed to mind him overhearing what they were saying about him. On the contrary, it was as though they were hoping he would get angry and start shooting again, so that they could hear his story firsthand. He says he saw Cedric Diggory murdered. He reckons he dealt with you-know-who. Come off it. Who does he think he's kidding, poor Liz? What I don't get, said Harry in the shaking voice, laying down his knife and fork. His hands were trembling too much to hold them steady. Is why they all believed the story 2 months ago when Dumbledore told them? How can Dumbledore have let this happen? Hermione cried suddenly, making Harry and Ron jump. Crookshanks leapt off her, looking affronted. She pounded the arms of her chair in fury so that bits of stuffing leaked out of the holes. How can he let that terrible woman teach us, and in our OWL year too? Well, we've never had great defense against the dark art teachers, have we? Said Harry. You know what it's like, Hagrid told us. Nobody wants the job. They say is jinxed. Yes, but to employ someone who's actually refusing to let us do magic, what's Dumbledore playing at? And she's trying to get people to spy for her, said Ron darkly. Remember when she said she wanted us to some and tell her if we hear someone saying you know who back? Of course, she's here to spoon on us all. That's obvious. Why else would Fudge have wanted her to come? Span Hermione. Don't start arguing again, said Harry wearily, as Ron opened his mouth to relight it. Can we let's just do that homework, get it out of the way. They collected their school bags from a corner and returned to the chairs by the fire. People were coming back from dinner now. Harry kept his face aware from the portrait hall, but could still sense the stare he was attracting. Shall we do Snape stuff first? Said Ron, dipping his quill into his ink. The portraits of Moonstone and its uses in potion parchment, as he spoke them. There. He underlined the tide, then looked up expectantly at Hermione. So what are the portraits of Moonstone and its use in potion making? But Hermione was not listening. She was squinting over into the far corner of the room, where Fred, George, and Lee Jordan were now sitting, at the center of the knot of innocent-looking first year, all of whom were chewing something and seemed to have come out of a large paper bag that Fred was holding. The thing is, Harry, I'm not sure they did, said Hermione grimly. Let's get out of here. She slammed down her own knife and fork. Ron looked sadly at his half-finished apple pie but followed suit. People stared at them all the way out of the hall. What do you mean? You're not sure they believe Dumbledore? Harry asked Hermione when they reached the first floor landing. Look, you don't understand what it was like after it happened, said Hermione quietly. You arrived back in the middle of the lawn clutching Cedric's dead body. None of us saw what happened in the maze. We just had Dumbledore's word for it that you know who had come back and killed Cedric and fought you. Which is it true, said Harry loudly. I know it is, Harry, so will you please stop biting my head off, said Hermione wearily. It's just that before the truth could sink in, everyone went home for the summer, where they spent 2 months reading about how you were a Nightshade and Dumbledore's going senile. Rain pounded on the window panes as they strode along the empty corridors back to Gryffindor Tower. Harry felt as though his first day had least a week, but he still had a mountain of homework to do before bed. A dull, pounding pain was developing over his right eye. He glanced out of a rain-washed window at the dark grounds as they turned into the Fat Lady's corridor. There was still no lights in Hagrid's cabin. Mimblulus Mimbletonia, said Hermione before the Fat Lady could ask. The portraits swung open to reveal the hall behind, and the three of them scrambled back through it. The common room was almost empty. Nearly everyone was still down at dinner. Crookshanks uncoiled himself from an armchair and strode to meet them, purring loudly, and when Harry, Ron, and Hermione took their 3 favorite chairs at the fireside, he leaped lightly into Hermione's lap and curled up there like a furry ginger cousin. Harry gazed into the flames, feeling drained and exhausted. No, I'm sorry, they've gone too far, she said, standing up and looking positively furious. Come on, Ron. What? Said Ron, plainly playing for time. No, come on, Hermione. We can't tell them off for giving out sweets. You know perfectly when that those are bits of nosebleed nougat or picking pastels or fainting fancies, Harry suggests quietly, one by one, as though he hit over the head with invisible mallets. The first year are slumbering unconscious in their seats. Some slid right onto the floor, others merely hang over the arms of their chairs, their tongues lolling out. Most of the people watching were laughing. Hermione, however, squared her shoulders and marched directly over to where Fred and George now stood with clipboards, closely observing the unconscious first year. Ron rose halfway out of his chair, hovered uncertainly for a moment or two, then muttered to Harry, "She's got it under control," before sinking as low in his chair as his lanky frame permitted. "That's enough," Hermione said forcefully to Fred and George, both of whom looked up in middle surprise. "Yeah, you're right," said George, nodding. "This dosage looks strong enough, doesn't it? I told you this morning you can't test your rubbish on students. We're playing them," said Fred indignantly. "I don't care, it could be dangerous." "Rubbish," said Fred. "Calm down, Hermione. They're fine," said Lee reassuringly as he walked from first year to first year, inserting purple sweets into their open mouths. "Yeah, look, they're coming round now," said George. A few of the first year were indeed stirring. Several looked so shocked to find themselves lying on the floor or diggling off their chairs that Gary was sure Fred and George had not warned them what the sweets were going to do. "Feel all right?" said George kindly to a small dark-haired girl lying at his feet. "I think so," she said shakily. "Excellent," said Fred happily, but the next second Hermione had snatched both his clipboard and the paper bag of fainting fancies from his hand. "It is not excellent." "Course it is. They're alive, aren't they?" said Fred angrily. "You can't do this. What if you made one of them really ill?" "We're not going to make them ill. We already test them all on ourselves. This is just to see if everyone reacts the same. If you don't stop doing it, I'm going to put us in detention," said Fred in an "I'd like to see you try it" voice. "Make us write lines," said George, smirking. Onlookers all over the room were laughing. Hermione drew herself up to her full height. Her eyes were narrowed and her beige hair seemed to crackle with electricity. "No," she said, her voice quivering with anger, "but I will write to your mother." "You wouldn't," said George, horrified, taking a step back from her. "Oh, yes, I would," said Hermione grimly. "I can stop you eating the stupid things yourself, but you're not giving them to first years." Fred and George looked thunderstruck. It was clear that as far as they were concerned, Hermione's threat was way below the belt. With a last threatening look at them, the thrust Fred's clipboard and the bag of fancies back into his arms and stalked back to her chair by the fire. Ron was now so low in his seat that his nose was roughly level with his knees. "Thank you for your support, Ron," Hermione said acidly. "You handled it fine by yourself," Ron mumbled. Hermione stared down at her blank piece of parchment for a few seconds, then said angrily, "Oh, it's not good. I can't concentrate now. I'm going to bed." She wrenched her bag open. Harry thought he was about to put her bags away, but instead she pulled out two misshapen woolly objects, placed them carefully on a table by the fireplace, covered them with a few squared up bits of parchment and a broken quill, and stood back to admire the effect. "What in the name of Marilyn are you doing?" said Ron, watching her as though fearful for her sanity. "They're heads for house elves," she said briskly, now stuffing her books back into her bag. "I did them over the summer. I'm a really slow knitter without magic, but now I'm back at school. I should be able to make lots more." "You're leaving out hats for the house elves," said Ron slowly, "and you're covering them up with rubbish first?" "Yes," said Hermione defiantly, swinging her bag onto her back. "That's not on," said Ron angrily. "You're trying to trick them into picking up the hats." You're setting them free when they might not want to be free. Of course they want to be free, said Hermione at once, though her face was turning pink. Don't you dare touch those hats, Ron. She laughed. Ron waited until she had disappeared through the door to girls' dormitories, then cleared the rubbish of the woolly hats. They should at least see what they're picking up, she said firmly. Anyway, he rolled up the parchment on which he had written the title of Snape's essay. There's no point trying to finish this now. I can't do it without Hermione. I haven't got a clue what you're supposed to do with moonstones, have you? Harry shook in his head, noticing as he did so that the ache in his right temple was getting worse. He thought of the long essay on giant dwarfs, and the pain stabbed at his sharply. Knowing perfectly well that he would regret not finishing his homework tonight when the morning came, he piled his books back into his bag. I'm going to bed too. He passed Seamus on the way to the door leading to the dormitories, but did not look at him. Harry had a fleeting impression that Seamus had opened his mouth to speak, but sped up and reached the soothing piece of the stone spiral staircase without having to endure any more provocation. The following day dawned just as leaded and rainy as the previous one. Hagrid was still absent from the staff table at breakfast. But on the plus side, no Snape today, said Ron basically. Hermione won wildly and poured herself some coffee. She looked mildly pleased about something, and when Ron asked her what she had to be so happy about, she simply said, "The hats have gone. Seems the Hower elves do want freedom after all." "I wouldn't bet on it," Ron told her cuttingly. "They might not count as clothes. They didn't look anything like hat to me, more like woolly bladders." Hermione did not speak to him all morning. Double charms was suggested by double transfiguration. Professor Flitwick and Professor McGonagall both spent the first 15 minutes of their lesson lecturing the class on the importance of OWLC. "What you must remember," said little Professor Flitwick squeakily, perched as ever on a pile of books so that he could see over the top of his desk, "is that the examinations may influence your futures for many years to come. If you have not already given seriously thought to your careers, now is the time to do so. And in the meantime, I'm afraid we shall be working harder than ever to ensure that you all do yourselves justice." They then spent more than an hour reviewing summoning charms, which, according to Professor Flitwick, were bound to come up in their OVL, and he rounded off the lesson by sitting them their largest amount of charms homework ever. It was the same, if not worse, in Transfiguration. "You cannot pass an OWL," said Professor McGonagall grimly, "without serious application, practice, and study. I see no reason why everybody in this class should not achieve an OWL in Transfiguration. As long as they put in the work." Neville made a sad little disbelieving noise. "Yes, you too, Longbottom," said Professor McGonagall. "There's nothing wrong with your work except lack of confidence. So today we're starting washing spells. These are easier than conjuring spells, which you would not usually attempt until nude level, but they are still among the most difficult magic you will be tested on in your OWL." She was quite right. Harry found the finishing spells horribly difficult. By the end of the double period, neither he nor Ron had managed to finish the snails on which they were practicing. Through Ron said hopefully that he thought his looked a bit paler. Hermione, on the other hand, successfully finished her snail on the third attempt, earning her a 10-point bonus for Gryffindor from Professor McGonagall. She was the only person not given homework. Everybody else was told to practice the spell overnight, ready for a fresh attempt on their snails the following afternoon. Now, panicking slightly about the amount of homework they had to do, Harry and Ron spent their lunch hour in the library looking up the uses of moonstones in potion making. Still angry about Ron's slur on her woolly hat, Hermione did not join them. By the time they reached care of magical creators in the afternoon, Harry Hitz was etching again. The day had become cool and breezy, and as they walked down the sloping lawn towards Hagrid's cabin on the edge of the Forbidden Forest, they felt the occasional drop of rain on their faces. Professor Crumbly Plank stood waiting for the class some 10 yards from Hagrid's front door, a long trestle table in front of her laid with many twigs. As Harry and Ron reached her, a loud shout of laughter sounded behind them. Turning, they saw Draco Malfoy striding toward them, surrounded by his usual gang of Slytherin cronies. He had clearly just said something highly amusing, because Scrabble, Goyle, Pansy Parkinson, and the rest continued to signer heartily as they gathered around the trestle table. Judging by the fact that all of them kept looking over at Harry, he was able to guess the subject of the joke without too much difficulty. "Everyone here?" bragged Professor Crumblyplank, once all the Slytherins and Gryffindors had arrived. "Let's crack on them. Who can tell me what these things are called?" They indicate the heap of twigs in front of her. Hermione's hand shot into the air. Behind her back, Malfoy did back to that impression of her jumping up and down in eagerness to answer a question. Pansy Parkinson gave a shriek of laughter and then turned almost at once into a scream as the wings on the table leaped into the air and revealed themselves to be what looked like tiny pixie creatures made of wood, each with a nobly brown arm and legs, two twig-like fingers at the end of each hand, and a funny flat bark-like face in which a pair of Tibble Brown's eyes glittered. "Oh," said Parvati and Lavender, thoroughly irritating Harry. "Anyone would have that that Hagrid never showed them impressive creations." Admittedly, the Flobberums had been a bit dull, but the salamanders and hippogriffs had been interesting enough, and the black-headed scrivs perhaps too much so. "Kindly keep your voices down, girls," said Professor Crumbly Plank sharply, scattering a handful and what looked like brown rice among the strict creatures, who immediately fell upon the food. "So, anyone know the names of these creatures, Miss Granger?" "Bowtruckles," said Hermione. "They're three gradients, usually live in one trees." "5 points for Gryffindor," said Professor Grubbly Blank. "Yes, these Bowtruckles, and as Miss Granger rightly says, they generally live in three house wood is of Wang quietly. Anybody know what they eat?" "Wood lice," said Hermione promptly, which explained why what Harry had taken for grains of brown rice were moving. "But fairy egg if they can get them." "Good girl, take another 5 points. So, whenever you need leaves or wood from a tree in which a bowtruckle lodges, it is wise to have a gift of wood lice ready to destruct or place at it. They may not look dangerous, but it injured, they will gouge out human eye with their fingers, which, as you can see, are very sharp and not at all describable near the eyeballs. So, if you'd like to gaze closer, take a few wood lice and bow truckle. I have enough here for one bit between three. You can study them more closely. I want a sketch from each of you with all body parts labeled by the end of the lesson." The class surged forward around the crystal table. Harry deliberately circled around the back so that he ended up right next to Professor Grumbleplum. "Where's Hagrid?" he asked her while everyone else was choosing bow truckles. "Never mind you," said Professor Crumblyplank repressively, which had between her attitude last time Hagrid had failed to turn up uh, for a class too. Smile, smirking all over his pointed face, Draco Malfoy leaned across Harry and seized the largest boat truckle. Maybe, said Malfoy, in an undertone, so that only Harry could hear him. The stupid great awful's got himself badly injured. Maybe you will if you don't shut up, said Harry out of the side of his mouth. Maybe he's been messing with stuff that's too big for him, if you get my drift. Malfoy walked away, smirking over his shoulder at Harry, who suddenly felt sick. Did Malfoy know something? His father was a Death Eater, after all. What if he had information about Hagrid's fate that had not yet reached the Order's ears? He hurried back around the table to Ron and Hermione, who were squatting on the glass some distance away and attempting to pursue a boat truckle to remain still long enough to draw it. Harry pulled out parchment and quill, crouched down beside the other, and relayed in a whisper that Malfoy had just said. Dumbledore would know if something had happened to Hagrid, said Hermione at once. It's just playing into Malfoy's hands to look worried. It tells him we don't know exactly what's going on. We got to ignore him. Harry. Here, hold the boat truckle for a moment just so I can draw its face. Yes, came Malfoy's clear drawl from the group nearest them. Father was talking to the minister just a couple of days ago, and it sounds as though the minister really determined to crack down on substart teaching in this place. So even if that overgrown moron does show up again, he's probably be sent packing straight away. Ouch! Harry has gripped the bow truckle so hard that it had almost snapped. It had just taken a great retaliatory swipe at his hand with its sharp fingers, leaving two long, deep cuts there. Harry dropped it. Crabble and Goyle, who had already been guffing at the idea of Hagrid being sacked, laughed still harder at the bow truckle set off at full tittle toward the forest. A little moving stickman soon slowed up by the three roads. When the bell echoed distantly over the ground, Harry rolled up his blood-stained bow-truckle picture and marched off to herbology with his hand wrapped in a handkerchief of Hermione's and Malfoy's derisive laughter still ringing in his ears. If he call Hagrid a moron one more time, snarled Harry. Harry, don't go picking a row with Malfoy. Don't forget, he's a perfect now. He could make life difficult for you. Wow, I wonder that it'd be to have a difficult life, said Harry sarcastically. Ron, lauded by Hermione, frowned. Together they traipsed across the vegetable patch. The sky still appeared unable to make up its mind whether it wanted to rain or not. I just wish Hagrid would hurry up and get back, that all, that Harry in the low voice as they reached the greenhouses. And don't they that crumbly plank woman's a better teacher, he added. I wasn't going to, said Hermione calmly, because she's never be as good as Hagrid, said Harry firmly, fully aware that he had just experienced an exemplary care of magic creatures lesson and was thoroughly annoyed about it. The door of the nearest greenhouse opened and some first years split out of it, including Ginny. Hi, she said brightly as she passed. A few seconds later, Luna Lovegood emerged, trailing behind the rest of the class, a smudge of airs on her nose and her hair tied in a knot on the top of her head. When she saw Harry, her prominent eyes seemed to bulge exactly, and she made a beeline straight for him. Many of his classmates turned curiously to watch. Luna took a great breath and then that, without so much as a preliminary preliminary hello. I believe he who must not be named is back, and I believe you fought him and escaped from him. Right, said Harry. Luna was wearing what looked like a pair of orange radishes for earning, a fact that Parvati and Lavender seemed to have noticed as they were both giggling and pointing at her earlobes. You can laugh, Luna said, her voice rising, apparently under the impression that Parvati and Lavender were laughing at what she had said rather than what she was wearing. But people used to believe there were no such things as the blibbering humdinger or the crumple hornet snorkak. Well, they were right, weren't they? Said Hermione impotently. There weren't any such things as a blundering hamdinger or the crumpled hornet's stork. Luna gave her a withering look and flounced away, radishes swinging madly. Parvati and Lavender were not the only ones who hooting with laughter now. I'd mind not offending the only people who believe me. Harry asked Hermione as they made their way into class. Oh, for heaven's sake, Harry, you can do better than her, said Hermione. Ginny's told me all about her. Apparently, she'll only believe in things as long as there's no proof at all. While I wouldn't accept anything else from someone whose father runs the Wibbler. Harry thought on the sinister winged horses he had seen on the night he had arrived, and have Luna had said she could see them too. His spirits sank slightly. Had she been lying? But before he could devote much more thought to the matter, Ernie Macmillan had spanned it up to him. I want you to know, Potter, she said in a loud, caring voice, that it's not only Warriors who support you. I personally believe you 100%. My family have always stood firm behind Dumbledore, and so do I. Uh, Thanks very much, Ernie, said Harry, taken aback but pleased. Ernie might be pompous on occasion like this, but Harry was in a mood to deeply appreciate a void of confidence from somebody who was not wearing radishes in their ears. Ernie Wood had sentently wiped the smile from Lavender Brown's face, and as he turned to talk to Ron and Hermione, Harry catch Seamus' expression, which looked both confused and defiant. To nobody's surprise, Professor Sport started their lesson by lecturing them about the importance of OWLS. Harry wished all the teachers would stop doing this. He was starting to get an anxious advice feeling in his stomach every time he remembered how much homework he had to do. A feeling that worsened dramatically when Professor Sport gave them yet another essay at the end of class. Tired and smelling strongly of dragon tongue, Professor Sprout's preferred brand of fatty leather, the Gryffindors dropped back up to the castle an hour and a half later. None of them talking very much. It had been another long day. As Harry was starving and he had his first detention with Umbridge at 5 o'clock, he headed straight for dinner without dropping off his bag in Gryffindor Tower so that he could bolt something down before Frances, whatever she had in store for him. He had barely reached the entrance of a great hall, however, when a loud and angry voice said, "Oh, Potter, what now?" He muttered wearily, turning to face Angelina Johnson, who looked as though she was in a towering temper. "I'll tell you what now," she said, marching straight up to him and poking him hard in the chest with her finger. "Now, come you launder yourself in detention for 5 o'clock on Friday." "What?" said Harry. "Why, oh, here, Keeper Triads." "Now he remembers," snarled Angelina. "Didn't I tell you I want to do a trial with the whole team and find someone who will fight in with everyone? Didn't I tell you I'd booked the Quidditch pitch specially? And now you decide you're not going to be there. I didn't decide not to be there, said Harry, stung by the injustice of these words. I don't determination from that Umbridge woman, just because I told her the truth about you know who. Well, you can just go straight to her and ask her to let you off on Friday, said Angelina fiercely. And I don't care how you do it. Tell her you know who, a figment of your imagination. If you like, just make sure you're there. The stormed away. She stormed away. You know what? Harry said to Ron and Hermione as they entered the Great Hall. I think we'd better check with Badlimer United, whatever Oliver Wood's been killed during a training session because she seems to be channeling his spirit. What do you reckon are the old odors of Ambridge letting you off on Friday? Said Ron spectacularly as they sat down at the Gryffindor table. Less than zero, said Harry glumly, typing lamp shops onto his plate and staring to it. Better try though, and I'll offer to do two more detention or something. I do know. He swallowed a mouthful of potato and added, I hope she doesn't keep me too long this evening. You realize we've got to write three essays, practice washing spells for McGonagall, work out a countercharm for Flitwick, finish the Bowtruckle drawing, and start that stupid dream diary for Trelawney. Ron nodded and, for some reason, glanced up at the ceiling. And it looks like it's going to rain. What's that got to do with our homework? That Hermione, her eyebrows raised. Nothing, said Ron at once, his ears reddening. At 5 to 5, Harry bade the other two goodbye and set off for Umbridge's office on the first floor. When he knocked on the door, she said, Come in a surgery voice. He entered casually, looking around. He had known this office under three of its previous occupants. In the days when Gilderoy Lockhart had lived here, it had been plastered in beaming portraits of its owner. When Lupin had occupied it, it was likely you would meet some fantastic fascinating dark creature in a cage or tank if you came to call. In the imposter Moody's days, it had been packed with various instruments and artifacts for the detection of wrongdoing and concealment. Now, however, it looked totally unrecognizable. The surface had all been wrapped in lacy covers and cloths. There were several vases full of dried flowers, each residing on its own doily, and on one of the walls was a collection of ornamental plates, each decorated with a large technicolor kitten wearing a different bow around its neck. These were so full that Harry stared at them, transfixed until Professor Umbridge spoke again. Good evening, Mr. Potter. Harry stirred and looked around. He had not noticed her at first because she was wearing a lyrially flowered set on robes and blended only too well with the tablecloth on the desk behind her. Evening, Harry said stiffly. Well, sit down, she said, pointing toward a small table wrapped in lace beside which she had drawn up a straight backed chair. A piece of blank parchment lay on the table, apparently waiting for him. Said Harry without moving. Professor Ambridge, before we start, I want to ask you a favor. Her building eyes narrowed. Oh, yes. Well, I'm on the Gryffindor Quidditch team, and I was supposed to be at the tours for the new keeper at 5 o'clock on Friday, and I was wondering whether I could skip detention that night and do it another night instead. He knew long before he reached the end of his sentences that it was no good. Oh no, said Umbridge, smiling so widely that she looked as though she had just swallowed a particularly juicy fly. Oh, no, no, no. This is your punishment for spreading evil, nasty, attention-seeking stories, Mr. Potter. And punishments certainly cannot be adjusted to suit the guilty one's conventions. No, you will come here at 5 o'clock tomorrow, and the next day, and on Friday too, and you will do your detention as planned. I think it rather a good thing that you missed something you really want to do. It ought to reinforce the lesson I am trying to teach you. Harry felt the blood surge to his head and heard some pink noise in his ears. So he told Ewell nasty, attentional-seeking stories, did he? She was watching him with her head slightly to one side, still smiling widely, as though she knew exactly what he was thinking and was waiting to see whatever he would start shooting again. With a massive effort, Harry looked away from her, dropped his skull back beside the straight-backed chair, and sat down. There, said Umbridge sweetly. We're getting better at controlling our temper already, aren't we? And now you are going to be doing some lines for me, Mr. Potter. No, not with your quill, she adds, as Harry bent down to open his bag. You're going to be using a rather special one of mine. Here you are. She handed him a long, thin black quill with an unusual sharp point. I want you to write, I must not tell lies, she told him softly. How many times? Harry asked with a creditable imitation of politeness. Oh, as long as it takes for the message to sink in, said Ambridge sweetly. Off you go. She moved over to her desk, sat down, and bent over a stack of parchment that looked like essays for marking. Harry raised the sharp black quill and then realized what was missing. You haven't given me any ink, he said. Ah, you won't need ink, said Professor Ambridge with the mass suggestion of a laugh in her voice. Harry placed the point of the quill on the paper and wrote, I must not tell lies. He let out a gasp of pain. The words had appeared on the parchment in what appeared to be shining red ink. At the same time, the words had appeared on the back of Harry's right hand, cut into his skin as though traced there by a scalpel. Yet, even as he stared at the shining cut, the skin held over again, leaving the place where it had been slightly redder than before but quite smooth. Harry looked around at Umbridge. She was watching him, her white, toad-like mouth stretched in a smile. Yes, nothing, said Harry quietly. He looked back at the parchment, placed the quill upon it once more, wrote, I must not tell lies, and felt the searing pain on the back of his hand for a second time. Once again the words had been cut into his skin, once again they held over seconds later. And on it went. Again and again Harry wrote the words on the parchment in what he soon came to realize was not ink but his own blood. And again, the words were cut into the back on his hand, held and then repaired the next time he set quill to parchment. Darkness fell outside Umbridge's window. Harry did not ask when he would be allowed to stop. He did not even check his watch. He knew she was watching him for sign of weakness, and he was not going to show any, not even if he had to sit here all night cutting open his own hand with this quill. Come here, she said after what seemed hour. She stood up. His hand had tightened painfully. When he looked down at it, he saw that the cut had held, but that the skin there was red raw. Hand, she said. He extended it. She took it in the own. Harry repressed a shudder as she touched him with her thick, stubby fingers on which she wore a number of ugly old rings. That I don't seem to have made much of an impression yet, he said, smiling. Well, well, I just have to try again tomorrow evening, won't we? You may go. Harry left her office without a word. The school was quite deserted. It was thoroughly past midnight. He walked slowly up the corridors, and when he had turned the corner and was sure that she would not hear him, run. Broke into a run. He had not had time to practice washing spells, had not written a single dream in his dream diary, and had not finished the drawing of the bowtruckle, or had he written his essays. He skipped breakfast next morning to scribble down a couple of made-up dreams for divination, their first lesson, and was surprised to find diswalled Ron keeping him company. How come you didn't do it last night? Harry asked as Ron stared wildly around the common room for inspiration. Ron, who had been fast asleep when Harry got back to the dormitory, muttered something about doing other stuff, bent low over his parchment, and scrawled a few words. That's we'll have to do, he said, slamming the diary shut. I've said I dreamed I was buying a new pair of shoes. She can't make anything right out of that, can she? They hurried off to North Tower together. How was detention with Umbridge anyway. What did she make you do? Harry hesitated for a fraction of a second, then said, Lines. That's not too bad, then, huh? Said Ron. No, said Harry. Hey, I forgot. Did she let you off for Friday? No, said Harry. Ron groaned sympathetically. It was another bad day for Harry. He was one of the worst in Transfiguration, not having practiced washing spells at all. He had to give up his lunch hour to complete the picture of the Bowtruckle, and meanwhile, Professor McGonagall, Crumley, Plank, and Sinistra gave them yet more homework, which he had no prospect of finishing that evening because of his second detention with Umbridge. To cap it all, Angelina Johnson tracked him down at dinner again, and on learning that he would not be able to attend Friday's Skipper Trot's, told him she was not at all impressed by his attitude, and that she accepted players who wished to remain on the team to put training before their other commitments. I'm in detention, Harry yelled after her as she stalked away. I do think I'd rather be stuck in a room with that old toad or playing Quidditch. At least it's only lines, said Hermione consoledly, as Harry sank back onto his bench and looked down at his stick and kidney pie, which he no longer fancied very much. It's not as if it's a dreadful punishment, really. Harry opened his mouth, closed it again, and nodded. He was not really sure why he was not telling Ron and Hermione exactly what was happening in Umbridge's rooms. He only knew that he did not want to see their looks of horror. That would make the whole thing seem worse and therefore more difficult to face. He also felt dimly that this was between himself and Umbridge, a private battle of wills, and he was not going to give her the satisfaction of hearing that he had complained about it. I can't believe how much homework we got, said Ron miserably. Well, why didn't you do any last night? Hermione asked him. Where were you anyway? I fancied a walk, said Ron shiftily. Harry had the distant impressions that he was not alone in compelling things at the moment.